Good evening and welcome. My name is Michael Drillinger. I'm the chairman of the 10 Mile River Scout Museum, which is located at the 10 Mile River Reservation in Narrowsburg, New York. The museum is hosting a series of talks. This being one of them. And the talks are virtual because we're all suffering through this same pandemic. I'm really thrilled, though, that you signed up and that you're here with us tonight. Thank you. I think you'll have fun. The 10 Mile River Scout Camps is a 12,000-acre reservation. The camps were established in 1927, largely due to the work of several prominent New Yorkers, including Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The TMR Scout Museum was started in 1997 and is dedicated to preserving the history and artifacts of the 10 Mile River Scout Camps and also the local area. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, the museum is closed. It would have been open all summer, but it's not. But you can take a virtual tour of the museum if you go to the museum's website, tmrmuseum.org/historian. If you have questions, feel free to call the museum at the number on the screen. We're using the GoToWebinar platform, and somewhere on your screen will be this little control box with a section marked questions. If you have questions of the presenter during the course of the presentation, feel free to type them here, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can get to at the end of the presentation. This is going to be at one point an interactive presentation, and we're going to ask for volunteers to actually do some improvisation. We don't have a raise hand function here, but we do have the question box. So if you would like to participate in one of the improvisation exercises, just type in the question box, choose me. At the end of our program tonight, you'll be asked to take a brief survey, and we would really appreciate it if you would do that. A video of this complete program is going to be available on our YouTube channel in about 3 days. There are various ways that you can interact with the museum. One is by visiting our website. Another is by looking for our Facebook page. We also have a Twitter account. And as I mentioned, we have a YouTube channel, search for 10 Mile River Scout Museum. And as I mentioned, we also have a virtual museum tour, which you can find on our YouTube channel. Again, if you have any questions or want to get in touch with the museum, you can call this phone number, or you can email the museum at questions@tmrmuseum.org. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at chairman@tmrmuseum.org. Although we offer these programs free to all who wish to watch them and participate, there is some minimal cost the museum incurs in making these programs. And if you feel so motivated and would like to support this work, please visit the tmrmuseum.org page/donate and make a contribution. Tonight, the museum is proud to present Mr. Kenn Adams, who will talk about learn how to do an improv scene, as well as actually do several with you. Kenn is an Eagle Scout, and he's the artistic director of Synergy Theater, an improvisational theater company in the San Francisco Bay Area. He is the author of the book, How to Improvise a Full-Length Play, The Art of Spontaneous Theater. And he is the creator of the classic short-form improv game, Sit, Stand, and Kneel, and the Family Dinner, AKA Ding, Buzz, or Biography. Kenn is also the creator of the Story Spine, a simple exercise for understanding story structure that has been embraced by improvisers, writers, and teachers the world over. Kenn began his career in New York City with Freestyle Repertory Theater, the New York home for theater sports, and has been performing, directing, and teaching improvisation for over 30 years. I've known Kenn since he was a young scout, and he was the best senior patrol leader I ever had. So it is our great pleasure to present Kenn Adams.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm just going to take 1 minute in order to click all the buttons that I need to click in order to make sure that I am going to be able to use my slideshow correctly. So let me ask, is that working? Does everybody see my first slide now, Michael?
Yes, Kenn.
All right, awesome job.
You want to click from beginning, though.
Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much. And welcome. Thank you for being here. As Michael told you, my name is Kenn Adams. I'm the artistic director of an improvisational theater company called called Synergy Theater. And we're out here in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we're going to spend about 50 minutes together today. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I ended up being a professional improviser, what improvisation is, how it grew up in the world and eventually found its way here to the United States. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what my company, Synergy Theater, does, how improvisers all over the world improvise. And then, as Michael said, we will have some fun doing some improvisation together. Forgive me, I'm just making sure that I have the ability to change my slide, and I do. All right. As Michael told you, I am a very proud Eagle Scout. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and there were 2 scout troops that were a dear part of my youth and early manhood. In Brooklyn, New York, that was my home troop. I was a member of Troop 202. And I spent 6 very important and wonderful summers of my life at Chapagat Hill in Camp Kunita, 10 Mile River Scout Reservation for summer camp with Troop 521. I'm going to take 1 moment of personal privilege here. It's very rare that I get to speak to a bunch of Boy Scouts and hit some of the people who I know are out there. So I do want to mention that as a Scout, as everyone knows, there are so many mentors and influences that come into your life and have such a strong hand in shaping the man you become. There were 5 people over my course as a Boy Scout that were so important to me. I would feel awful if I let this opportunity go by without mentioning them tonight. Barry Esbin was my very first Scoutmaster in Troop 202. Freddie Friedson was a dear family friend who was also an adult scout leader in Troop 202 and a surrogate father figure for me at a time when I really needed it. Michael Drillinger, the man who just introduced me, was the Scoutmaster and perhaps the older brother figure that I idolized most in the world. Michael Drillinger was a huge influence in my life. Maybe the only person who came close to that was David Lalonic, who was the Scoutmaster of Troop 521 while I was up at Boy Scout camp in 10 Mile River. And a dear and unfortunately departed friend of all of ours, Larry Lachey, who was an adult leader in 202 up at 521 all the time, and a very close personal family friend to myself and my mom. So many people affected me so positively throughout my time with the Boy Scouts, but I would not be the person that I am today without the friendship and influence of those 5 men. So thank you, you 5 men. All right. I was lucky enough to be born in Brooklyn, New York. And if you are interested in theater in Brooklyn, New York, and you have a mom who can care enough to take you into Manhattan to see a bunch of Broadway shows, as I very fortunately did, then you could be influenced by great Broadway theater. And I was, as a young man, just learning about theater and becoming interested in it. I saw some amazing theater, and the most powerful and influential shows I remember was the ones represented on these playbills before you. So I saw the original production of Dracula starring Frank Langella, the original run of Grease, A Chorus Line, the original run of Little Shop of Horrors when it was a small off-Broadway show at the Orpheum Theater in New York, and then later in the 80s, La Cage aux Folles. These are just some of the plays I saw that made me fall deeper and deeper in love with theater and determine to have a career in it as I got older. However, when I first started my trek towards a career in theater, although I loved acting very, very much, I was really interested in playwriting. and I was determined to be a professional playwright. The picture before you now are some cover sheets of some early plays that I wrote. If you take a look at the one on top, you'll notice that one was not written by Kenn Adams. That one was written by Kenny Adamowski, and that was my name when I was a kid and a Boy Scout, and all those 5 men I mentioned, they knew me as Kenny Adamowski before anyone knew me as Kenn Adams. So then it was playwriting that I was interested in as I embarked upon my college career, determined to learn more about it. And to give you a sense of the somewhat pinball ride through college I had, I created this flowchart. So it all started with me going to SUNY Binghamton, where I studied acting and playwriting. But after 2 years, I determined to drop out and become a playwright. At which point my mother explained that I either go to college or I pay rent to live in her house. At which point I went to Brooklyn College. I spent a year at Brooklyn College studying acting and playwriting, at which point fate intervened and I was recruited by NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, and they offered me both a bachelor's degree in dramatic writing and a master's degree in writing for musical theater. So I went there, but before I got there, we had a summer to kill. And so I signed up to be in a play and take a theater class at beautiful Kingsborough Community College. And I spent a glorious summer at Manhattan Beach in Brooklyn, taking one of the best classes in college that I ever took. If you look at the 4 schools I went to, you'll notice I went to one private school, one state school, one city school, and that community college. And I'll tell you, the best class out of all of them that I ever took was that theater class at Kingsborough Community College. So yay Kingsborough and yay Brooklyn. To discover how I went from playwriting to more of a focus on improvisation, we need to back up to when I was at Brooklyn College. I was studying acting and playwriting. I never even heard of improvisation, but suddenly I made friends with a grad student named Yvonne Opfer, and Yvonne was already working with a young improvisational theater company in New York City. At that time, they were called Theater Sports for New York, the Theater Sports team for New York. I'll explain more about theater sports later. They eventually changed their name to Freestyle Repertory Theater, and they're still going now. They're still awesome, so we'll call them Freestyle Repertory Theater. Yvonne was working with them and offering some improvisational workshops during lunchtime on campus, so I took it, and suddenly my whole life and career ambition changed. I suddenly was introduced to this art form in which you are not only the actor, you not only have the fun of being on stage and acting the role and getting the feedback from the audience, but you are also the writer. You're creating the words and creating the story, and you're doing so instantaneously. So where you write a play, maybe 2 years later, if you're lucky, someone will produce it. But when you are improvising a play, it is happening right then and there. And I was so excited by this new art form that Yvonne and Freestyle Repertory Theater offered to me. I started working with them in Manhattan. I spent the next 10 years learning and growing and developing my theories and practice of improvisation with Freestyle Repertory Theater under the leadership and guidance of Laura Livingston and Michael Durkin. Then moved out to California, and sometime after moving out to California, I developed Synergy Theater, and that's the company that I run and that I perform with today. So during my years with Freestyle Repertory Theater, I developed a lot of ideas about how to improvise a full-length play. Back when I first started in the early 90s with freestyle, nobody was doing that yet. Lots of people were performing improvisation, but it was all what we call short form improvisation. Short comedy sketches, 2 or 3 minutes in length, usually with very shallow characters and situations based on audience suggestion. But at that same time, a lot of people around the country and the world were becoming interested in using the art of improvisation for something more, something larger and deeper and more artistically satisfying. And so a lot of us started working on this idea of improvising not just short comedy sketches, but an actual full-length play. And over the course of the years developing theories towards that, I eventually wrote them down in this book, How to Improvise a Full-Length Play, The Art of Spontaneous Theater, and that's what I do now with Synergy Theater. So, what is improvisation? Let's just make sure we all understand it to be the same thing. Improvisation is the art of spontaneous theater. So in the traditional theater, the playwright writes the play, the actors memorize the lines, the director is in charge of the whole production, they rehearse it maybe for several weeks until finally they perform it in front of a live audience. Improvisation is different. When you improvise, you do 4 things at least at the same time. You are an improviser making stuff up, but you're also the playwright, the director, and the actor. And you're doing it collaboratively with a whole team of playwright, director, and actors making the play up together. There are many, many different styles of improvisation. They all look and feel different. Synergy Theater, as I told you, we do full-length improvised plays. So here are some snapshots from the plays we've done. In the top left-hand corner there, that's from our spontaneous Brothers Grimm, an improvised play in the style of Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. We work in the style and genres of other famous literary formats. Down below, that gentleman on the couch is from our production of Spontaneous Farce, a bedroom farce. In the middle, that's from Improvisers in Space, our spontaneous starship adventure. Over to the right, those 3 ladies are from Improvised Agatha Christie, a Miss Marple murder mystery. And up on top, that's me in our production of Spontaneous Noir, a full-length improvised play in the style of a film noir. Now, that is what improvisational theater is, but it is also storytelling. Like all great theater, improvisation is the art of telling stories. And when I was first asked to do this presentation, my first instinct, well, what exactly is the connection between what I do now and the Boy Scouts? Why might this be of interest to a bunch of scouts? And the answer came rather quickly and rather profoundly, because storytelling is such an inherent part of the ritual experience that the Boy Scouts offers to its members. We go on camping trips, we sit around a campfire, and we tell stories, and we sing songs, and we perform sketches, we perform theater. And that idea of a group of people, a close-knit community, sitting around a campfire, listening to stories is thousands of years old. The original theater was the tribe gathering around the campfire and the storyteller entertaining and educating through this ritual of storytelling. That is deep in our DNA. And anybody who spends a significant amount of time in the Boy Scouts, as I did, will be so deeply nourished by that ritual offering of story around the campfire that it will feed into an interest in theater. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was already very interested in theater, but my experience around those campfires with the Scouts, they nourished that. And they made it so important to me as a part of my life that I really couldn't dream of doing anything else. So amongst all of the other things that the Scouts do for people, it instills them with the importance and the beauty of ritualistic storytelling. And that's a wonderful thing to pass on. So the history of improvisation, improvisational theater is really, really old. Back in 300 BC, there was something called a Tellan farce, and that was back in ancient Rome. Atella was a city in ancient Italy, after which this is named. And these were improvised scenes based on scenarios. So the basic story was already written out, but all of the action, all of the dialogue was improvised, made up by the actors. And as was very traditional back then, they used stock characters and masked performers. So a stock character means that it was a character that appeared again and again and again in the plays. There were maybe a dozen, 24 characters, and all of these improvised farces used the same characters in different situations. And all of the actors wore masks. The masks served many different purposes. They performed in great outdoor amphitheaters. So for one thing, the masks exaggerated the facial features so the people could see them. Also, the mouth parts were shaped like megaphones, and so it helped to transmit the sound further out. So the masks not only had ritualistic and theatrical reasons for being, but they also had very practical theater reasons for being, so the people could see and hear better. These were rustic comedies, and they were short farces performed after the main piece of the festival. The next time improvisation becomes very important is in the 1500s to the 1700s, and that introduces this very foundational movement in the theater called the Commedia dell'arte. The Commedia dell'arte was the most important, the most popular type of theater in all of Europe for 200 years. And like the Tellin farces, it also traded in stock characters. They all wore masks. And there were different professional groups of commedia players all over Europe. And they would often be families that traveled together and grew up together within the different roles as they were performing. Commedia dell'arte was also all scenario based, so they wrote out very detailed scenarios of what was going to happen, but they improvised the dialogue around that. Commedia characters are so influential. Shakespeare, Moliere, every playwright during that time and after pulled stories and characters from the Commedia dell'arte right up to modern day sitcoms. Any sitcom has certain character types in it. All of them come straight from the Commedia dell'arte. It's important, so we'll spend a little bit more time on it. Here's a close-up of some of the masks that the Commedia dell'arte performers would wear. Over on the left side, that one marked Pantalone. Pantalone was the old man. So he was the old man who would often get in the way of the two young lovers who were trying to get together, but for some reason he didn't want them to. On the other side, Arcolino, he was one of the servant characters, and he was like a wily, mischievous servant. That little knob on his head is reminiscent of a devil's horn to symbolize his mischievousness. And he would also often be employed by the young lovers to help trick the Pantalone so that they can get together. In the middle there's a whole bunch of other characters. Capitano up at the left, he was a soldier who was always bragging about his exploits, but in fact was a terrible coward. And as I said, there were maybe 15 or 20 stock characters. All the commedia companies used the same characters, mixed them up in different iterations, and wrote new, silly farces filled with crude humor, sexual humor, physical humor, and improvised around those scenarios. Here is a picture of a couple of modern day acting companies performing Commedia dell'arte. So you can get a sense of what the costumes look like and what some of the masks look like. After the Commedia dell'arte, nothing really much important happens until you start to look over at the United States of America and improvisation's entree into our country. So the first one that we have to pay attention to is a very important lady named Viola Spolin. She was a theater academic, an educator, and an acting coach, and she spent a summer teaching theater to a bunch of immigrant children, and she was having trouble trying to get them to access their spontaneity with the language barrier. So she started using what she referred to as theater games in order to have a fun way for her kids to participate in theater in a way that made it silly and enjoyable. Then a couple of years later in 1955, her son, another very, very famous and important man in the history of improvisation, Paul Sills, he was in college and he had a theater company. Viola Spolin went over there to Chicago and started working with her son's theater company, the Compass Players, teaching them those theater games that she invented for those kids to work in over the summer. The Compass Players took those theater games, developed them a little bit, and those became the very first professional short form improv shows that we know of being performed in the United States of America. Paul Sills and David Shepard went on to co-found the Second City, which many of you will know from the famous TV show Second City TV. Then we can blip forward to the late 1970s. The next large foundational force in improvisational theater was from British and Canadian educator and playwright Keith Johnstone. In 1977, he and a fellow named Mel Torkin co-founded a company called the Loose Moose Theater Company, and Keith took his understanding of improvisational theater and his desire to create a type of theater that would be as interesting to the fans as professional wrestling. And that's a true story. He saw professional wrestling and he said, why isn't theater as exciting as this? Why aren't the fans in the theater leaping up and screaming and cheering for the heroes and booing the villains? And so he invented something called theater sports. That's what I was doing in New York when I joined that very first company, the New York Team for Theater Sports. Theater sports is a format for performing improvisational theater where we pretend it's a sporting event. The acting company breaks up into teams. There's a referee who's the host of the show, and the teams are challenged to do different types of improvisational feats. So for example, you might be challenged to do the best scene about a fish, or you might be challenged to do the best scene in which you're not allowed to use any words starting with the letter R, or any type of challenge at all. Then both teams would do the scene, and the audience or a panel of judges would decide who did the best scene. Theater sports became an international phenomenon, and to this very day, there are theater sports companies literally in every country in the world performing theater sports. In 1981, we can look back at Chicago. Two names to know, Del Close and Sharna Halpern. Del Close and Sharna founded something called Improv Olympic, and like theater sports, that was competitive improvisation. Del Close went on to be credited with either inventing or significantly developing something that was out there. Depends who you believe on that. But it was a thing called the Herald. And the Herald is the first and most foundational entry into the category that we call long form improvisation. So improvisation has two different main categories, short form and long form. Short form is like theater sports, short 2 or 3 minute scenes based on audience suggestions, usually very silly and very funny. Long form is improvised theater. It has a million different shapes, but it is more concerned with developing real characters and telling sustained stories and exploring themes the way theater does, which short form really doesn't have the capability of doing in its limited amount of time on stage. So the Herald, I'll explain a little bit more about that later. The Herald is attributed to Del Close, and it was the first popular piece of long form improvisation that companies started doing in the United States. Then in 1998, Whose Line Is It Anyway came to the United States from Britain, and suddenly improvisation became a household word. Whose Line Is It Anyway was basically theater sports on stage, and it was short form improvisation. Everybody loved it, everybody heard of it, and now suddenly every high school and every college in the country had an improv team. You walk onto any campus now, there's an improv team. In the 1990s, that was not the case. When I went to college, all those colleges, improv just wasn't a thing, and who knows, probably never would have been the kind of thing it has become if not for Whose Line Is It Anyway popularizing it on television. So we definitely owe them a debt of gratitude for that. Okay, so I mentioned the two different performance styles of improvisation. Basically, there's short form represented on the left hand of the screen there, and long form represented on the right hand side of the screen. The top, the gentleman in the striped shirt, those people are performing theater sports. So he's the host of the show. He pretends to be a referee. Those two people are the captains of the different teams. He's issuing the challenge. They're going to both do their scene. Then the audience will vote on who did the better scene. At the end of the night, there's a winner. Keith Johnstone was right. The audiences did react to theater sports and do the way professional wrestling fans react at a wrestling match. And that was exactly what Johnstone wanted to instill in the theater. Down below, those people in that workshop there, they're doing a short form format called conducted story. This is very famous. People do it all over the world. The four improvisers are taking turns telling a story, improvising a story, and the fellow on the bottom there is conducting them. So when he points to someone, they immediately pick up the story where the other person left off, and the people need to be listening to what's going on so they can come in at the when they're chosen and continue the story until it gets to the end. Short form improvisation. On the right side, long form improvisation. There's basically two styles of that, the montage and the sustained narrative or the play. So a montage is a long form style where scenes grow one out of the other and they're loosely connected either thematically or by the characters, but there's not really a sustained narrative, not a story with a beginning and a middle and an end. Those folks on the top there, they're doing a montage. The Herald is a montage style of long form improvisation. It tends to be abstract, it tends to be thematic, it has lots of different scenes, one blossoming into another. So at the end of the night, you walk away with this big, beautiful image of a theme or a topic analyzed from different points of view and explored through different characters and relationships. Then there's what Synergy Theater does, the improvised play. So we pick a style, like there we are doing the improvised adventures of Sherlock Holmes. We pick a style, we research and practice improvising in that style. We understand what makes that style unique unto itself. Then we improvise in the style of that writer. So we understood how Conan Doyle wrote Sherlock Holmes stories, and then we made up our own. And in order to keep us honest in improvising, we get suggestions from the audience throughout the course of the show to make sure that we're staying spontaneous and not doing anything pre-scripted or pre-rehearsed. So those are the two basic different styles of improvisation. Synergy Theater, we perform full-length improvised plays. We do that at the Lesher Center for the Performing Arts in Walnut Creek, California. That's the outside of the beautiful Regional Arts Center. That is the inside of our theater there on the left. It's a 135-seat black box theater. There we are again as a cast shot from Sherlock Holmes. That woman is Lynn Shields. That's from our spontaneous Shakespeare show, a full-length play improvised in the style of Shakespeare. And again, I write about how to do all of that in that book, How to Improvise a Full-Length Play. To give you a sense of some of the genres that we've tackled with Synergy Theater, down below under the logo there, that's from spontaneous farce in the style of a door-slamming bedroom farce. Up on top there, that's Z is for Zombie, an improvised zombie apocalypse. And that's a fun show in the style of a Hollywood zombie movie. Below that is the Brothers Grimm again, spontaneous Brothers Grimm. And over to the right is Justin Carnes playing Sherlock Holmes. And above him, an improviser named Ed Meehan in our spontaneous noir. Now, we're not in that theater anymore, are we? We are at home, and we have moved so that during the pandemic, we are producing and performing improvisation online using Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. So to give you a sense of some of the shows we're doing now that we're at home, up top there, those two little people, that's from our show, My Dearest Love, a series of improvised letters, which is told in the style of an epistolary novel, characters writing letters back and forth to each other. Down below them is spontaneous soap opera, where you never know when three people are going to end up in bed together. Up top is the Intergalactic Support Group, our science fiction show, where characters alienated on different planets meet in a chat room in order to talk. And below that is the Mating Game, which is an improvised show in the style of a game show similar to the dating game, but which is really an exploration of love, dating, and relationships in the modern era. So that's what Synergy Theater is up to now. We perform Thursdays at 4 o'clock and Fridays at 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel. Okay, how do they do it? Well, an improviser is at least 4 different things. First of all, you have to be an actor because you're on stage pretending to be a character. And going through an emotional journey. You have to know how to do that well. You also have to be a director because you are spontaneously creating the stage picture that the audience is looking at. You have to be a playwright, so you have to know how plays are constructed so that you can construct one on the spot. And you need to be an improviser. That is an art form unto itself. You need to know how to work with other people in order to access your spontaneity and collaborate effectively in order to unite all of these skills into one collaborative vision on the spot. But there's many different things that you can improvise. So some people improvise musicals, in which case you have to be a singer, a dancer, and a musician. You also have to be a lyricist if you're going to make up songs, and you have to be a choreographer if you're going to make up dances, and you have to be a composer if you're going to make up music. So whatever it is you choose to improvise, you need to master those skills in order to be able to do it well. So improvisation is theater. The more practiced you are as a theater professional, the better you can hope to be an improvisational artist. How do we take all of those skills and work together? How is it that improvisers from all over the world who never met each other can get on stage together and make stuff up? Well, it's because we all have a basic set of rules that we're following. The way I phrase it is the 3 rules of improvisation. Number 1, be spontaneous. Say or do the first thing that pops into your mind. Trust your creative instincts. Number 2, make your partner look good. Improvisation is a team sport, and it's built on making your partner successful, always achieving success through the success of your partner. You do that for her, she does that for you, and then everyone is successful. And build on your partner's ideas. So one person makes an offer, another person builds on it, and by doing so, you create a story together. So a little bit of jargon. In improvisation, anytime you introduce something to the scene, we call it an offer. When you make your partner's offer true and important, we say you've accepted the offer. If you make your partner's offer false or unimportant, we say you've blocked your partner's offer. You don't want to do that. You always want to accept and not block. And then there is this concept of saying yes and that's become a buzz phrase that is quite popular in the world now, and it means accepting your partner's offer and then building upon it. So we use those 3 rules of improvisation, all of those theater skills, to create spontaneous theater, and that is the art of improvisation. At this point, let's improvise. So at this point, what I would like to do, Michael, Mitchell, are you out there? I think I want to turn the screen back over to you folks. Is that right? So that we could.
Mitchell.
You're actually out there all by yourself.
You can keep it yourself, and I'm going to bring in some people who volunteered that want to improvise with you. So give me a second, and we shall do it.
So is everybody still looking at my slideshow, or are we good?
We're good.
Okay.
All right. So let's see if he's on yet. All right.
This is like dead air. Maybe you should do a tap dance.
Yeah, talk and let me see. Ralph, you should turn on your webcam and click on OK, and you should be a presenter.
Is that Ralph Daddy?
Yeah, we just got to get him in.
I grew up with Ralph Daddy. We were in the Boy Scouts together, and I haven't spoken to Ralph Daddy in maybe 35 years.
I got to figure out how to turn on the webcam.
Hello, Ralph Daddy.
What's up, Kenny? How are you?
On your control panel to
I'm
click
really well. Thank you for being here. As Ralph Daddy is figuring out how to turn on his webcam, let me take a moment to mention that after all of this, if improvisation seems like fun and anybody out there wants to explore a little bit more of it with Synergy Theater, we are doing a number of things online. For one thing, as I said, we are performing online. If you search YouTube, you'll find our Synergy Theater YouTube channel, or you can find us on Facebook. Hey, Ralph Daddy. And you can watch us perform improvisation Thursdays at 4 o'clock, Fridays at 7 o'clock California time. Hello, Ralph, my friend. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much for helping out. So we are going to start off by doing a very, very simple, fun, and easy improvisation exercise. And we're going to use those 3 rules that I spoke about. Be spontaneous, make your partner look good, and build on your partner's ideas. And that concept of yes and. So the way this is called a yes and story. And the way it works, Ralph, is I'm going to start and I'm just going to say a sentence, a simple sentence like, Mary walked out of her house. As soon as I say whatever I say, you are just going to shout out without thinking, yes and, the words yes and then say the very next sentence that pops into your mind that follows the one I said. So Mary walked out of her house, you might say, yes, and she hailed a taxi cab, or anything at all that pops into your mind just by being spontaneous. Then I'm going to say yes and add a sentence to what you just said. And then we're just going to go back and forth maybe 10, 15 times, creating a spontaneous yes and story. Does that sound all right?
Sounds good.
All right, let's give it a shot. Here we go. Peter jumped out of the airplane.
Yes, and you won't believe what he left inside the airplane.
Yes, he left the important attaché case with the secret files in the airplane.
Yes, and the government's going to be very upset that he didn't take it with him.
Yes, and when he got back to government headquarters, he was brought into the interrogation room.
Yes, and he almost forgot his parachute too.
Yes, and because he had become such a mess, he was fired from the government.
Yes, and it was for the best anyway. He really wasn't suited for the job.
Yes, and so he went back to his childhood dream of opening a flower shop.
Yes, and unfortunately, he didn't pay his water bill, so all the flowers died.
Yes, and after realizing he failed at 2 jobs, he fell into a deep depression.
Yes, and good thing for him, he played the lottery and won.
Yes, and he won $10 billion.
Yes, and unfortunately, he gave most of it to Trump's campaign.
Yes, and there is no need to go on. Excellent job. Oh my goodness. If you're out there, give Ralph Daddy a large round of applause. That was amazing. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I think maybe we have time for one more demonstration, and that will be something that will involve 2 volunteers plus me. So Ralph, you can either stay on if you want to do something else, or Mitch, I'll turn it over to you if you want to just find me 2 volunteers for this next bit.
Okay, so somebody just put in the chat room or in the questions that I want to do it, and we'll plug you on. Or if not, Michael Drillinger is going to do it with Ralph.
All right.
Hey,
So Ralph, I'll ask you to stay there then.
Mitchell, if David can't get on by his camera, he can get on audio. I mean, we don't have to see him. Some people would probably
It
prefer
might
not.
be better.
Yeah.
David, you are unmuted now, Lalonic. Talk to us.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Oh, David Lalonic, hello.
Yes.
Hello, Kenny. Hello, Ralphie.
Hey, Dave.
Oh my goodness. Is there no way we can see you? That would be so awesome if we could, but if not, that's okay.
Well, I don't know. Apparently, I'm having some sort of issue or problem I'm using my iPhone. It's not working well.
All right.
That's
well,
why. I have low bandwidth.
Let's just go on. So we'll all just have to listen a little bit more closely so we make sure that we can really focus on what Dave is contributing. So this is called a he said scene. And the way it works is Ralph and David are going to be the two characters in the scene. I'm going to be the narrator, and I'm going to set them up for when it's time for them to talk. And for example, I'll do a quick demonstration with Ralph. So Ralph, I'm going to give you a little setup, and then I'm going to say, he said, and then you say something that that character would logically say. Very easy, spontaneous, first thing that pops into your mind. So for example, he walked into the corporate boardroom, put his attaché case on the glass table, and he said,
I'm not going to take this anymore.
fantastic, fantastic. Okay, David, I'm going to do the same kind of practice thing with you now, unrelated to what I just did with Ralph, all right? So here we go, a brand new one. After jogging 5 miles around Central Park, he sat down underneath a tree, looked up at the sky, and said,
Why the heck did that bird poop on me?
that's perfect. Excellent job. Okay, now we're all three going to work together in order to create a scene. So I'm going to narrate for each of you, but now we will continue the same story. So you two people will be having a conversation in the course of the scene. I will also give stage directions. I'll tell you what the characters are doing, and that will also influence what the characters say. All right, Mitchell, in true style, we always start improvisation with a suggestion from the audience. So Mitchell, I'm going to ask you if you could suggest a location, an outdoor location where this scene will take place.
It will be outdoors in Hidden Valley on a blue seat.
In Hidden Valley on a what?
On a blue seat.
On a blue seat. Okay, that sounds like something I might supposed to know, but maybe I don't. All right, here we go. Remember, gentlemen, be spontaneous, make your partner look good, make each other look good, and build on each other's ideas. Ralph, I'm going to call you the Scoutmaster, and David, I'm going to call you the Senior Patrol Leader.
Sounds good.
It was a hot summer day in Hidden Valley at 10 Mile River Scout Camp in Narrowsburg, New York. The Scoutmaster wiped his brow, looked at the beautiful expanse of nature, and said,
Boy, I could really use a Cherokee Red right about now.
well, the ever eager to please Senior Patrol Leader reached into his backpack, pulled out a Cherokee Red, and said,
My gosh, I only have one. I'm sorry, sir, but I really want to enjoy it myself. So I'm going to pop it open. Sorry, guy.
well, he drank the Cherokee Red all by himself. The Scoutmaster knew that this scout needed moral training, and so the Scoutmaster said,
A scout is kind. You should have shared it with me.
and he turned his back in a huff. Well, the Senior Patrol Leader began to feel remorseful. He said,
Okay, sir, I'll might have another one in my lean-to. I'll go run and get it for you.
he ran and got it right away. He came back with it and handed it to the Scoutmaster. The Scoutmaster said,
Thanks a lot, kid. You're one of the good ones.
he opened it up. Of course, it sprayed all over the place because the Senior Patrol Leader had been running with it, but he didn't care. He had instilled moral virtue into that young scout, and he felt darn good. The end.
Yay!
Excellent job. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ralph.
All right.
Awesome, right? Notice how just by following those 3 rules of improvisation, be spontaneous, make your partner look good, and build on each other's ideas, 3 people can get together and make up a lovely little story that they each had no idea they were going to be a part of only moments before. And that is the art of improvisation. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the demonstration portion of this. I don't know if it pays to go back to my slideshow or not. Basically, I will just mention that Synergy Theater has shows. We also have online improv classes. So if anybody would like to do some more improvisation, you can. And it's all on my website at synergytheater.com. 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 Thank you so much for being here. And now I am very happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Ken, and it's Mitchell again, and thank you, Dave and Ralph. We have some questions and some quick statements. So I would love to know, how do you manage props? Do you just take a box full of stuff and blandly pull it out, or is it more planned?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. And there are as many different styles of improvisational performance as there are improv companies. Everybody does something different. The most traditional thing is to not have any real physical props and just pantomime everything, because especially in short form improv, every scene is in a different place about a different thing. You just have no idea what you're going to need. So we just pantomime, we just pretend. But in the full-length improvised plays like Synergy Theater does, if we're doing Sherlock Holmes, we know we'll probably want guns, we'll probably, we need his pipe, we might want a lead pipe for someone to get hit with. So we'll gather a bunch of props that we think we might need and keep them handy in case we do.
That is great. And we have a comment here from a Scoutmaster that says, during our campfires, we used to do continuation stories where one scout would start the story, calling the next scout to continue it. Who knew we were doing a little bit of an improv at the fire? And
yes, absolutely. I cannot stress enough how rich the experience is of those Boy Scout campfires. You think about the stories we tell and the skits we do. Part of it is for the enjoyment of the stories, but as you all know, we often tell the same stories that we tell each month, and we do the same skits again and again and again, and we love seeing them again and again, and that's because only part of what we're there for is the story. The other part is the ritual and the tradition and the joy of being with our community, going through our ritualistic mythology and our tales. And that is so deep and enriching. And every time you bring scouts on a camping trip and offer them that, you're doing them a great service. And yes, sir, whoever said that, a lot of those skits involve improvisation, and a lot of those storytelling activities we do around the campfire were absolutely improvised.
Great. And we have two final questions, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Michael to wrap up our show. Did any play you did disappoint or flop, and what's your favorite?
Say that again. Did any play we do disappoint or flop, and what is the favorite? Improvisation is high risk, and it would be hard times to find an improviser who has never flopped and who hasn't flopped quite often. So it wasn't so much the play that flopped, but there were certainly times where our group of improvisers were not gelling as well as we had wished. We weren't accepting offers as skillfully as we should have, or we weren't making each other look good. As you can imagine, there's a real temptation to pull the attention of the audience onto yourself and get a quick laugh, maybe at the expense of someone else on stage. We work very, very hard not to do that, but we are all human and we are all open to making mistakes. So there have been times where I left the stage feeling, that wasn't such a great show. But again, not because of the style we chose, because of our skills that night as improvisers. My favorite is two: spontaneous Shakespeare. I love William Shakespeare, and improvising as close as we can in the language and the style of William Shakespeare is always a delight and one of my definite favorites. And the other one was that improvised Brothers Grimm. We did that in a really innovative style where we emulated a style of theater called story theater, which was invented by Paul Sills, that guy I told you was Viola Spolin's son back in the 60s. And in story theater, the ensemble uses their bodies to create all of the sets. So if you're walking through a forest, the ensemble becomes the trees. And if you're up a mountain, the ensemble becomes the mountain and then the cabin at the top. So that was a real experiment in ensemble work, improvising not only verbally, but physically. And that was probably one of my favorite shows.
Perfect. And on that note, if anyone has any other questions they think of that they didn't ask today, you can email us through GoToWebinar. We will get back to you. And I'm going to flip it back to Michael to do the wrap up of our play. Michael, you're on.
As we're waiting for Michael to come on, I'll mention in that picture you're looking at, that is from Spontaneous Shakespeare that I was talking about. That's Ed Meehan in the purple robe, Justin Carnes in the gold shirt, and that's me in the green cloak.
Thanks for that, Ken, because I also forgot to turn my microphone on and I've been talking, wondering why no one's. Anyway.
That's okay, Michael. Let's roll it. Stagecraft.
Okay. So the TMR Scout Museum and me personally extends my deep gratitude to my good friend Kenn Adams for tonight's fun talk and workshop. And we hope you all who've tuned in enjoyed it and that you'll join us again for our future talks. In the next few days, you're going to receive an email from GoToWebinar with copies of tonight's slides and a link to the recording of tonight's presentation. And a copy of the recording is also going to be available on the TMR Museum's YouTube channel. And also, there will be that brief survey that I told you about at the beginning. As I mentioned before, you can take a virtual tour of the museum, and scouts who wish to take the tour can actually earn the 2020 No COVID TMR Historian Patch. In addition, the museum is offering at our online museum store this 6-inch back patch commemorating this very unusual summer, the first time in almost 100 years, not quite, that 10 Mile River Scout Camp is not open for scouts for the summer due to COVID. I want to let you know that on Thursday night this week, August 13th at 7 p.m., there'll be a discussion about bats in the upper Delaware River Valley. Our presenter will be National Park Ranger Erica Spees, and we hope you will come back and join us then. Thanks so much, and do keep in touch by email or on our Twitter feed and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. And again, have a great evening.